Hello folks and welcome to the show here in OurGame with myself, Shane Stapleton, joined this week by Nickey Brennan. We're going to have Bernard Flynn, former Meath footballer, on, and Phil Lanigan of the Daily Mail a little bit later on, so we've loads on the show as well. And for people who might have missed the other day, Michael Verney has had a child, a young daughter, so if you want to message him on Twitter and congratulate him, he's over the moon. He's getting very little sleep. And hopefully, actually, Nickey, that lack of sleep means that he didn't see what happened over the weekend to Offaly against Tipperary.
Yeah, absolutely. It was... Look, in a way, Shane, I think this was something that was going to happen. I think it was going to be very hard for the defeated McDonagh finalists to come in and rise their game again. I think we'll probably go into the game in a moment, but I think from an Offaly perspective, one of the most disappointing things about it was that 2 weeks previously, Offaly brought a huge crowd to Thurles for the under-20 All-Ireland final. And on last Saturday, I was listening to it as I was heading to the game in Carlow, and there was Tipperary outnumbered the Offaly support 5 or 6 to 1. Now that must be very disheartening for the players, but it's difficult enough to know how the players would motivate themselves to something like that. I think what we've seen really over the weekend, while the game in Carlow was competitive, and we'll talk about that in a moment, I think really we have seen the last time we'll see teams from the Joe McDonagh entering the championship quarterfinal preliminary rounds. I don't think it's going to happen again, and I think that's the end of it. I think it's the right thing to do as well. If you take Carlow, they had the celebrations with the McDonagh Cup. And Tom Mullally alluded to that afterwards in his interview. Maybe they overdid the celebrations. I don't blame him one bit for that. But it's very hard to motivate yourself for another competition where realistically, you're not going to win it. I don't care what anyone says. So, but I think that's the end of it now. And I think we've seen some horrendous results in the preliminary quarterfinals over the years. And I think that's that. And it's not being disrespectful. It just means that the McDonagh finishes with the final and you win it or you lose it and whatever. But it also means that it creates maybe an extra 2 weeks space. And that's probably nearly more important in the calendar where things could be pushed out a little bit. Now, I'd be hoping they might even push them a little bit into August maybe, but that's another argument for another day. But at least if you got rid of the preliminary quarterfinals, it would give a little bit more space to the competition and give teams a chance to catch their breath.
Yeah, and I think it'd be a good idea to go another week or two into August. Like, there's so many clubs that are going to lose out because players are going to head away on J1s for the summer and then they're scrambling for players. But another thing, Nickey, I want to ask you is, because of your knowledge of GA administration, having been Leinster chairman, GA president, would you think it's one of those things that it can be turned around quick enough to have that rule removed, to remove the Joe McDonagh finalists from the competition as soon as 2024 championship?
Yeah, I do so. There's currently a series of engagements taking place around the country with Derry Kent's CCC, talking to counties about various aspects of games, not just hurling, by the way, but football as well. So I honestly think that'll happen and there will be changes. And I think this is one of a number of changes that will take place. I also thought that there was some momentum built up for under 19 maybe to come in instead of, 17 would be development, but instead of 20. And the thinking being there that you would confine that solely to players. You couldn't play inter-county senior if you played under 19, but equally it would start putting back the opportunity to play under 19 on the same bill as a senior inter-county game, because we're seeing senior inter-county games now as standalone fixtures. And we've all become accustomed in the GA to double headers. But I understand now that the under 19 concept is completely dead in the water and it's not going to happen, and that's it. So we're going to see under 17 continuing in the manner it is. I'm a little bit disappointed about that, because I think that's under 17 playing in such intensity. If you take the final in Thurles there recently with the under 20 and under 17 together, I just feel that under 17 with 16-year-olds playing, it's putting them under enormous pressure, and I feel they should be allowed more a developmental role in that grade. But look, there's no point in talking about it. I think that's the way it's going to be now, so we just have to get on with it. I know there would be those who would still prefer to see under 18, minor back at under 18, but that argument was very well defeated at Congress earlier this year, which I actually thought, I was a bit surprised, to be honest about it.
Do you know, I know obviously you're on more so to talk about the hurling, but again, because of your history as GA president, what are your thoughts on the Tailteann Cup? Like, to me, you look at both competitions now, Sam Maguire and Tailteann Cup, we're getting close games across the board, and even in the latter stages of the football now, you have a lot of counties that were probably a little bit burned how earlier in the season went, the likes of Down and Meath and, Laois, even they were under huge criticism. Antrim were there as well. Like, it's actually tasty enough now heading into the final stages. So to me, it's a success.
Oh, it's a huge success. I mean, it's very obvious. Look, in hurling, and I know we'll bring it up maybe later on, we have the McCarthy, McDonough, Ring, Rackard, and Marr tiers. And while there's an issue between the bottom of McCarthy and the top of McDonough, which we'll chat when we're talking about the two matches in a minute, nevertheless, I think we've got it right in terms of structure at hurling, and hurling people have accepted that, and we're seeing the lower tier counties getting really competitive competitions and getting to play their finals in Croke Park, which are going down well. And bear in mind, every single final this year was won by a very narrow margin in Croke Park. So that's working out very well. It took the football crew a long time to accept that, and I think they've got it very right this year. But what has helped enormously is the fact that counties that found themselves in that position accepted it and went for the competition. And it's been very, very good. And I absolutely I'm delighted with the approach they've taken, and we've ended up with a very good competition and some very competitive games and two very good semi-finals which will take place next Sunday in Croke Park.
And I'm sure you noticed the news there last night about Declan Hannon. A statement was put out by Limerick GA saying Declan sustained a knee injury during last Sunday's Munster final that will rule him out for the All-Ireland semi-final in 3 weeks' time. We wish him well in his recovery in the coming weeks and look forward to seeing him back on the field once again. So the big question is, who slots in at number 6 and how many switches do you need to make for that to work? You know, again, you've been manager. You don't want to make 4 switches to fix one position. You'd love to just draft one man in and that's it sorted. But with Sean Finn already out, you can't really take Dan Morrissey from the full back line. Do you move Kyle Hayes in from centre back or Diarmuid Hannon or Diarmuid Burns and lose what they bring on the wing and bring Colin Coughlin in? It's a tough one actually for John Kiely. This is a bit like Clare in the Munster final. There was no obvious answer to Conor Cleary being injured, so it meant there was a very obvious problem, as we saw in the final then.
No, I think you're right there. I think there is obviously a temptation to put maybe Kyle Hayes more so than Diarmuid Burns, because Diarmuid Burns, he's such a radar for deliveries down on the left-hand side of the field. He's in a wing-back position. You can often get into a good place to set up your attack with a ball. Maybe not as much in the centre because you have a bigger space to kind of cover. So I think John Kiely has a big dilemma on his hands. And I think he just might throw in somebody else that hasn't maybe played there before. I have a feeling he might have been thinking about this all along, because Hannon has been getting injured in a number of matches and has been going off. And I'm absolutely sure that John Kiely and Paul Kinnerk and the rest of the guys are going to have thought this one through and have seen the possibility that we could have to line out without Hannon in a big game. So I'd say they have somebody up their sleeve. I think it might not be Burns or Kyle Hayes, because I think they bring so much as wing backs, because they're very attacking wing backs and scoring wing backs. So he might see that as a very advantageous to his team, the way they set up the play for the attackers. So he might just go for somebody in the centre and just try to hold the middle like that. I think that's what he'll probably do. Who that person is, I don't know. He has a habit of bringing people out of the subs. And what he's done this year as well, and he used the National League very wisely for this, he got a number of players a lot of game time that hadn't been getting game time up to that. I mean, players like Cathal O'Neill now, and he's a forward, but he's a far more experienced player now. And he's just one example. But there's plenty of other players there that he can bring on. And I think that's where he'll I think he'll pull a rabbit out of a hat like that.
Colin Coughlin is probably, of the younger players that haven't really played before, has probably got the most game time, but that would be a big one to throw him in at centre back. Do you think that's, I mean, maybe you could put Will O'Donoghue, who has played there for Na Piarsaigh, put him centre back and bring in Cian Lynch maybe midfield, but no matter what option we're talking about here, it feels like you can make an argument for why that may not work as well, which is part of the problem.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you take Kilkenny at the moment, Kilkenny are grappling with centre back at the moment. They've Richie Reid injured. They played Paddy Deegan there. They played Hugh Lawler has been played there, and it's very hard. It's very hard to know who Kilkenny might absolutely play there again the next day. If Richie Reid comes back, does he absolutely slot into it? I think one of the people listening, they're talking about Coughlin being played at centre back. I think that's a real possibility. I think John Kiely is building up faith in his squad. So I think if you have faith in your squad, I think you're saying to yourself, we have 24 players here, and on any given day, if we have to start at him, we have to start at him. Show faith in your squad, and they have delivered that, and they've got now experience through the league. They got some game time in the championship. You can afford to do that. maybe throughout the championship. Particularly Munster is very competitive, so you have to mix your squad a little bit during matches to give a little bit of experience, because you simply can't just use the same 15 every day. The players will not be able to perform beyond the Munster Championship if that's whichever team has their target in Munster anyway.
Yeah, Garrod Ogo Gracon is informing us of the draw for the semi-final of the Tailteann Cup. Down will face Laois, which is tasty enough. Laois getting a great win over the weekend after the criticism that their manager Billy Sheehan spoke about. And Meath against Antrim. It would just have to happen for Andy McEntee.
I was saying that yesterday. It is exactly the draw that would take place, Meath and Antrim. And look, it's going to be a tasty one for him. And isn't it ironic how sport, it throws up these pairings after a manager just leaving a county. Maybe he felt he was pushed out. So here he is now. Now, he's done a great job in getting Antrim into the Tailteann Cup semi-final. Now, their game with Carlow yesterday, I was listening to some of it, and they were going very well at one stage. Carlow nearly hauled them in at the end, and perhaps might have had a goal which would have tightened it up. But look, it's very hard to say. But look, it's probably looking like down in Meath if you wanted to take two teams at this stage. But Laois have done very well in Limerick the other day against the odds. And look, Andy McEntee will be looking for a special effort from his boys against his native county. So look, it's an interesting draw, and as you said, it'll be a good finale to the competition, whoever wins it.
Yeah, and just to give the preliminary quarter-final draw for the Sam Maguire, Kildare against Roscommon was drawn, but of course that can't happen because they just played yesterday. So it's going to be Kildare against Monaghan. Second game is Cork Roscommon. So Davy Burke's Roscommon will be looking to bounce back, and Cork can keep their composure after that brilliant win against Mayo to stay going. Donegal against Tyrone. It will be a great game, but to be honest, I'd love to see a different draw because they play so often, and that of course means Galway against Mayo.
Oh yeah, Galway beat Mayo. Yeah, look, at it was inevitable. Galway were probably going to get Mayo or maybe even Roscommon from that point of view. I was actually watching Cork and Mayo yesterday. Actually, I enjoyed the game very much. I have to say, it was they really tore into one another, and when they got the goal. When Mayo got the goal and to put them 6 points up from Tommy Conroy, you would think at that stage it was fair to call at that stage, say that look, here's Mayo going to win this one. But in fairness to obviously they turned the ball over so quickly. I mean, Mayo lost the ball, and I can't think of the player's name, but he made a great run and was fouled and got the penalty. And Sherlock, talk about an inspired substitution. I mean, he scored 1-5 or 1-6 when he came on, and everything he touched, he just got it under the bar or over the bar. It's what you dream your substitutes are going to do. But he did come on and play. He played with fierce confidence and the type of arrogance that's a good arrogance in that context. But Mayo were scrambling, and look at it's typical Mayo. You know, when the heat came on, there just was no leaders on the field who could get the ball and do something about it. And Cork were full of running, and credit to John Cleary because he's done a great job. And I suspect, I wouldn't know, I met him a couple of times, but I don't know Kevin Walsh. But clearly he's brought something to the Cork setup, which has got the players to believe as well. So, look, Roscommon, I think he said Roscommon are travelling to Cork. That won't be easy now, and because Davy Burke will have been very disappointed. He had a quarter-final position secure there until Kildare. Now the big question, I suppose, that's all going to be asked, Shane, is Kildare are playing Monaghan. So where is home venue for Kildare? They choose Nolan Park for the game against Dublin. Now, they didn't have a choice of yesterday's venue in Tullamore. My gut feeling is that they may go back to Tullamore, having won there yesterday. So we think we probably mightn't see a big football game in Kilkenny this week. But who knows? Maybe they'll stick Dublin and Clare in Nolan Park, because Tipp and Galway are likely to go to the Gaelic rounds in Limerick, albeit Cork are looking big time for one of the quarterfinals down by the Lee.
But nobody wants to go down to Cork. It's too far of a spin. Like, it actually is harsh to ask counties to go all, like, that's a tough draw for Cork. That's where you are, and people don't want to drive there.
Yeah, I think that game, I'm not sure that game is probably on Sunday. I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, they're the questions that are going to be grappled with today. If they're going to play Tipp and Galway in Limerick, seems a logical location, but they will confirm that, as Garrod is saying here on the screen. They will certainly to make that decision today, but they have a decision then to make. They can't really play a game in Thurles if Tipper are out of town, as they say. So where's the next venue? Possibly Portlaoise. Nolan Park would fix, and I'm not being parochial here now. It ticks a lot of boxes on the basis that of the amount of seating that's in there and all of that, and the possibility of attracting a local crowd as well to enhance the attendance. So I just don't know, but it's going to be a very busy weekend, because I think a lot of those games are down for penciled for Saturday, because the Tailteann Cup is penciled for Sunday. So it's going to throw up the old challenge again of coverage of games and what people can actually see on live TV or on GA Go.
And depending on what way, like if you're to go along form lines, people would expect Tipperary maybe to edge out Galway and Clare to beat Dublin. If Clare had to play at Nolan Park, they probably wouldn't be delighted that all the locals, if they're going to face Kilkenny next, can be there watching them and studying them from every angle. And you'd probably put up cameras all over the place as well, watching their every move down there. So maybe that would be a factor. If you were a manager, would that be a factor? If you were Brian Lohan, would you be like?
I honestly think, in fairness, that when you get to when you're wherever you're involved in as a manager, you just have to switch off and you play where it's fixed for and get that, and don't let that be the noise in the dressing room. You have to look at other things. I am quite sure that Clare had people watching the game in Carlow on a Saturday evening. It was not on television. It was not on GA Go, which was a shame, to be honest about it, because it was a great game. But Clare were in the attendance in Carlow on Saturday. They saw what Dublin could deliver, and they're well geared up for Dublin. Teams are meticulous in their planning now. They have all that type of information. They'll have all the statistics. They'll have watched previous matches that they will have played. They will have watched the Dublin v Galway game, for example, Dublin v Kilkenny game. This is the way managers and their backroom team now, the entourage they have at the backroom team now is such that there are specific people there to set out to review the video and to produce all the statistics that could be possible to consume in relation to hurling. So they'll be well ready for that. So I don't think it'll make a damn to Brian Lohan where he's playing this match. He's now knowing he's playing Dublin. He has to prepare well for that. Mentally, physically, they're preparing all the time. Mentally now is to get it right. And Clare, I think, would be too strong for a Dublin team that is improving, but it'll take a year or two yet for Micheál Donoghue to get the best out of that team. But they are improving. But Clare will be maybe a challenge too far for them. But it could be very competitive for a long time.
So we're going to have Galway, Tipp and Dublin Clare, so we'll be previewing them big time later in the week. But just to talk about Tipperary beating Offaly by 738 to 318. A couple of weeks ago, before we knew that they were going to end up meeting, but myself and Verdi were plotting sort of a path where it could happen, I said I was just messing, and I said, look, would you take a 15-point loss now if I handed it to you? And, he wasn't answering me. And then I said it to him again 2 weeks ago when we knew it was going to happen, and he wouldn't. I could never have believed that would end up a 32-point loss. It was just a crushing defeat.
Yeah, it's absolutely demoralising. I think Johnny Kelly had been making decent inroads there. Now, I know he'll be hugely disappointed not being in the, having lost the Joe McDonagh, but that is going to be very, very difficult for everybody in Offaly hurling to stomach, to be honest about it. I mean, it's the highest scoring game in the hurling championship ever. It topped the 80-point mark. And we also had a bit of history, and it's only right we should acknowledge this, that Seamus Callanan hit the 40-goal mark. He's the first player ever to hit 40-goal marks, all from playing the championship. Now, that is a serious record, and a fair credit to his prowess as one of the great forwards of modern-day hurling. There's no question about that. But it's but for Offaly, I mean, the game was over at such a short period. As I said, I was heading to Carlow. It started at 4. The one in Carlow was at 5, and I was listening to it on the radio. And look, the game was over after 10 or 11 minutes. Once Tipp bagged their first goal, it was a matter of how much it would be. But the final score at the end was just demoralising. You have a situation with Tipperary, to be fair. I've no criticism whatsoever of Liam Cal and his players here. You do what you have to do. So there's positions up for grabs on that Tipperary team, and you want to be putting yourself in a position, if not a starting position, then make sure you're part of the first 21 anyway. So it was just an outstanding performance by Tipperary, ruthless in the extreme. But this stage of the championship, that's just the way life is, and it's just Offaly coming in on the back of losing the Joe McDonagh. No doubt about it. It must have been very difficult for Johnny Kelly to lift that team and try and get them back into championship mode. And I just felt it was always going to be a step too far. But at the end of the day, the margin was the hugely disappointing thing from an Offaly point of view. But look, Tipp will be happy. Players get confidence from bagging goals and points and that. But it'll be a very different game against Galway at the weekend.
Yeah, a very costly one for Burr too, because Owen Cahill, who'd scored 1-7, was playing brilliantly. he seemed to do a bad hamstring injury, so maybe he'll be in bother now for the county championship. Charlie Mitchell, I was delighted for him because obviously the under-20 final didn't work out great as captain of Offaly that day, and he was taken off early in the second half. He got 1-1 for himself. He was decent. And Jason Sampson looks a player, especially when he moved up the field, who looks totally at home at Liam McCarthy level.
Well, look, yeah, the important thing for Offaly now, I was delighted for Mitchell as well, and that often happens actually, because you'll often find when you have a senior player like that plays 20s, it just might not work. I mean, I'll give you an example. It's rather maybe the same thing as Charlie Mitchell. For myself in '74. Now I was a sub on the Kilkenny team, but actually came on and played in the Leinster final, and I actually played in the All Ireland semi-final. And I was actually taken off in the All-Ireland under-21 final against Waterford. But rather ironically, and I never saw this happen since, I was brought back on again in the last 10 minutes. Now, I don't know what that said, what the rest of the subs must have thought. But look, these things happen. Sometimes just because you're a senior player, there's an expectation that you're going to just run the show and it's under-20, under-21. It doesn't happen. But look, he's a good lad. He got a goal and a point, and hopefully there are better days. Look, the one thing about Offaly will have... top hurling in the National League. They won't be in the McCarthy Cup Leinster Championship next year, but they will have top hurling in the National League. So Johnny Kelly hopefully will use that to maybe improve the team further and make them competitive, and not feel that he has to go to that under-20 team too early, because there's still a lot of young lads on that, and he just needs to give them time to develop, to be honest about it.
Yeah, because they were even young for under-20 if the final proved anything. Another thing I wanted to mention then was, you were the original Peter Canavan then, like he came off and back on. So you were the original Canavan.
I wouldn't compare myself to that to Peter under any manner of means. It was just an incident that happened in a game. I don't know the background to it, but look, we won the All Ireland that year, and it was the first time we ever won the under-21 All Ireland in '74. But memories, Shane, memories.
And do you think Seamus Callanan, like as you said there, 40 championship goals all from play? There's nobody in the modern game who comes anyway close to that, especially from open play. Nobody is near. But, you have the likes of Nicky Racker, who has 59 goals, and, there's a couple of others, Tony Doran, I think he has over 40 as well. Well, give or take around that as well. Do you think Seamus Callanan gets the credit that's, warranted here? Because people talk about TJ, Patrick Horgan, Joe Canning, but it feels like they don't talk about Callanan in the same breath. When 40 championship goals from play in Munster, let's call a spade a spade. They're tougher teams. That's unbelievable.
I know, it's an incredible record. I think the difference probably from the Nicky Racker, Christy Ring, that era, is that there's a lot more games now. And I think that's probably a factor in helping the modern day hurlers to build up their scoring records and all of that. But it's an incredible record, and I think he's been a huge servant of Tipperary. And it's interesting that Liam Cahill, had him back at the edge of the square against Offaly. Now, I saw one of the goals he got was really down to some really poor defensive play, to be honest about it. But you have to give credit to Callanan. And look, it's often said that sometimes players maybe don't get the credit they deserve. But look, such is life. I mean, you have to, he just delivers every day and most days for Tipperary. And he probably would have added one more to that tally, and I'm just being a bit parochial here now, Shane. But for the lovely hoop that JJ Delaney did one time, I thought I might throw that one in just to add a little bit of spice.
Well, he scored 2-6 from play in those two games against JJ as well, I might remind you. So he didn't do too badly.
No, but I had to throw in the old hook because it was one of the great occasions in hurling in terms of a skill of a game that maybe we don't see as much of, but that was one of the great defensive skills that was there.
Okay, delighted to say we're joined now by Phil Lanigan of the Mayo. How are you, Phil? You well?
All good. How are you, Shane? How are you, Nicky?
Hello, Philip.
Well, look, we're talking here about Tipperary getting that victory against Offaly, and I think Tipperary had something like 13 different scores from play. Craig Morgan was back, had to go off with a hamstring cramp, so apparently that doesn't rule him out for the Galway game. Gerard O'Connor came back from injury. Jason Ford came back. All of a sudden it feels like and I think Cathal Barrett's going to be back the next day as well. All of a sudden it feels, Phil, like this Tipperary team is starting to come to the boil nicely at the right time.
Oh, look, Jason Ford's return was huge, wasn't it? He looked so sharp, and you just wonder, like, Tipp have been so good this year. Liam Cahill must be wondering, how did they end up in this position where they have Galway and Limerick to come when they should have been in the Munster final? Like that match against Waterford, it was the only blip the only real blip for this team. They've been at such a level, and they looked on it again. And the Waterford display was such an outlier that it's changed the whole course of the championship in every which way. So I know Liam Callanan, Tipp are kind of let's move on, but like the really when Clare would have been thinking, they would have fancied themselves chances against Tipp. Tipp would have fancied the Munster final. So it's going to be a very hard route to an All-Ireland, but they look like a team capable, again, they look like a team capable of winning it.
Yeah, and then like Nickey, from your point of view, it just feels like there's a bit of a maturing going on of some of the other players that Tipperary have. Mark Keogh being the obvious one. Now, I would have felt he should have had far more game time in the previous seasons anyway. But 3-3, and he just looks now like a killing machine.
Yeah, but I think Tipp just need to just chill a little bit now after Saturday. Obviously, we're always coming into the match on the back of losing to Joe McDonough. There was low morale in the camp. Johnny Kelly is a great guy who I know well, and he will have done the best to rise those guys. But Liam Cahill had to make a statement after the way they played against Waterford, as Philip has just said. They really blew a Munster Championship final that they should have actually got into, and it let them down big time now. Let's be through it. So players had to start atoning for that, and it was a ruthless performance, which you would expect from a team of Tipperary's calibre in the circumstances. And obviously we're always, in my view, going to be lambs to the slaughter last Saturday. So I think in terms of the amount of scoring returns where we saw Jason Ford with 2-11, Mark Keogh with 3-3, Morris with 7 points, though that type of scoring, you won't see that type of scoring against Galway. I'm not saying Tipp won't beat Galway, but it's going to be a very different. He'll have different markers on him. It'll be far tighter. You won't have as much space. You won't be able to get the freedom to drive the ball through the lines that you had last Saturday. So it'll be a very different game. So any comparison is just not worth talking about. It's a very different game, and Liam Cahill knows that as well.
And Phil, from your point of view, do you think this game there was much to be had for Tipperary in terms of, like, I'd see it as a bit of a tune-up fight, go out, get a bit of confidence, get lads scoring, blow off the dirty cobwebs from that Waterford game, and then, like, to be honest, to me now, assuming you come through with no injuries and Morgan's okay, it was the perfect game a week ahead of championship clash with Galway.
I would have thought so again. I think part of the reason why Tipp kind of flatlined against Waterford, like no Jason Ford, wasn't Jake Morris as well, like they're key players. So having Jason Ford back in that kind of form, Mark Keogh, anyone who scores a hat-trick, your confidence sky high. Seamus Callanan, as Nickey mentioned, you've a record-breaking goal scorer there. Like, these are just all positives. The only thing I'd say is like they conceded a scoreline that would probably win most All-Ireland finals, if you go back the years as well. So the worry is, in such a loose, open, high-scoring game, they still conceded a whacked awfully. So look, it'd be very different again, but I would have thought pretty much all plus sides from Liam Cahill's point of view.
Yeah, you were at the other game, Nickey. Dublin eventually beating Carlow 225-21. So they're in that quarterfinal now proper against Clare. But you weren't exactly blown away by the Dubs in this game, were you?
No, in the first half, their hurling was very poor. They were trying to drive the ball through the lines. It just wasn't working. Their first touch was poor. I mean, you had players dropping the ball and trying 2 or 3 times to rise the ball. And Carlow were up for it. Now, there was obviously a good Carlow crowd there, right crowd in Netwatch Cullen Park. A good atmosphere, absolutely a game that should have been on GA Go. It cried out for that far more than the Tipperary Offaly game. And it was a very competitive first half. And Carlow responded in kind every time, and they led at half time by a point, and deservedly so. But Dublin needed to change their format and drive the ball better down the field. Keane O'Sullivan was threatening at full forward, but he wasn't being given enough of the ball. But the 2 midfielders for Dublin were very good, it must be said. And in the centre of defence, Owen O'Donnell and Conor Burke were absolutely outstanding. And O'Sullivan then, when he got hold of the ball, he certainly he was a real threat. Now who got the 2 goals for Dublin were scored by Donald Burke. He actually was heavily bandaged. Now, he's the key forward for Dublin. He was bandaged, and while he was taking the frees, he didn't have the same level of mobility. So, now they did take him off before the game was over, but Dublin had it won at that stage. But the margin at the end was very flattering. But the 2 midfielders for Dublin were absolutely excellent, Grogan and O'Leary. They were really good. I think about 5 or 6 between them. Great mobility, and they were able to work the ball, run from midfield and take the ball from some of their inside attackers and move into space. So I'm sure that's something Clare will have watched. So look, in the second half, Dublin looked a far better team. Their more direct style suited them, but they'll still have, as I said earlier, I think it's a team that Micheál Donoghue is making good progress with, but he needs a little bit more time, and maybe one or two of the players who have gone travelling, if they were to come back, I'm thinking particularly of Chris Crummey, I think that would add a little bit more strength to the team. But it's going in the right direction. I don't know who's doing a good job, but sometimes I think their over-elaboration and short play is just not working to their advantage, particularly of their inside forwards.
Chris Crummey, not to mention Keane Callahan and
they're just a few. Absolutely,
yeah. I'm not sure if Liam Rush is planning on coming back to the team whenever he does return, and he's a lot of miles on the clock and injuries and stuff. But what a man when he is fit. And then just in terms of Carlow, Marty Kavanagh scored 12. I think were they all frees? I'm not sure who was man marking.
Yeah, no, he got a point or two. No, they worked well. I think one of the big, probably from a Carlow point of view, one of their star men in that game in the McDonagh final was Broderick, the corner forward. I mean, his ability to catch high balls, and I think Dublin nullified that pretty well. But Carlow, I mean, with certainly on 60 minutes, 62 minutes, there was only a goal or 2 or 3 points in it. There was very little in it at that stage, and the local crowd were really egging Carlow on at that stage. But Dublin, their direct play was the advantage in the end, and when the ball was sent in, nice bit of interplay, which saw Keane Callahan with the ball, and he drove it low into the net. I mean, that effectively wrapped up the game. They ran a couple of points too. Conor Burke landed 2 long-range points, really impressive striking from the centre half-back, it must be said. And they got a bit out of their bench as well. Dara Purcell, I thought, made an impression when he came on. I've seen that guy play for Coláiste Doane in colleges hurling for many, many years, and he's a good player and a nice guy to come in off the bench. So the Dublin bench delivered well on Saturday also. But look, Carlow did great. Tom Mullally alluded to maybe they over-celebrated the McDonagh. No fault for him on that. But look, they're now in the Leinster Championship next year, and I think he'll be keen now to make them give a decent enough impression next year and stay up there and not be back down in McDonagh again.
Yeah, Phil, everyone just expects Clare to beat Dublin this weekend. Nobody's going to say it's going to be easy now or anything like that, but people do expect this to be the end of the line for Dublin. What have you made of them this year, and what do you think their chances are this weekend?
It's kind of a little bit of same old, isn't it? Like the relying, Donal Burke has been so good this year. You're looking for kind of a greater spread of scoring options. I know Danny Sutcliffe's had some really good performances. They don't score enough goals at times. I know they got a couple late, but they were heading for a long part of that Carlow game, isn't it, without finding the net. It's through no fault of their own. I look at the footballers and you see Con up there, and the kind of player that they're just screaming out for as well. So like they're very strong, disciplined, structured, and at times sometimes just maybe a little bit too structured and systematic. But look, they're well capable of raising us. But if you look at maybe Clare's spread of scoring options, just looks that a good bit superior, the path they've come through. But look, after what happened last year, Kilkenny struck a blow for Leinster hurling, and absolutely did a job on Clare. And Dublin will be looking, kind of going, well, why can't we do the same? Wexford pushed Clare all the way, so like Dublin have it within themselves, and when they're on it, to really, really push it up. Sure, like they've been very solid. It's just that real spark, a bit of flair, a little bit extra, that X factor you're just kind of looking for all the time, maybe from them.
Nickey, last night on the Saturday evening on the Saturday game, Donal Cusack made a comment that the GAA has failed hurling. And like, you're a former GAA president, so I'm sure that kind of cuts close to the bone to some degree. What did you make of the comments, and do you think that they're in any way accurate?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are worth recalling. He talked about since the war. So I had a look at the since 1950 and 1922. There have been 73 All-Ireland finals played in both codes. Now, 14 counties have won in football. And if you work an average participation of 32 counties taking part in the championship each year, I know it varies a little, that's an average win of 44% of the counties participating are winning the Sam Maguire Cup. In the same period in hurling, 9 counties have won the 73 titles. Now, I'm given an average participation of 14. Now, I'm probably a little generous there, but I'm allowing for the B champions in the past, the Joe McDonagh entrance and all of that. I'm saying 14. And if you use 14 as the average participants, that's a 64% return in hurling. So actually more counties are winning in hurling since 1950 than have won in Gaelic football. So I think that's important to state that the impression is being given that there's only 2 or 3 counties in hurling, but in fact, proportionately more counties are winning in hurling than have won in football over the same period from 1950 to 2022. In addition, in terms of the supports that are there for hurling, now I'm not au fait with what's been happening post-COVID. I'm not involved, but prior to that, I had some involvement in Croke Park. And there's significant funding in relation to specific coaching officers around the country, hurling coaching and hurling coaching personnel around the country. Now, particularly north of the line from Dublin to Galway, it must be said. There's lots of supports for competitions. There has been subsidies for helmets and hurleys. And I would estimate that certainly over the last 6 to 10 years, there's probably been at least €6 million spent in relation to hurling in one way or another. And in fact, when Liam O'Neill was president, in his parting address, he asked for €1 million to be put into hurling for Carlow, Westmeath, Antrim and Laois, those 4 counties. Now, Offaly made the case that they should have been included as well, and they were. So that €1 million was split over for 5 years, 200,000 a year, 200,000 for the 5 years, 40,000 a year. And there was a group set up within Leinster Council, of which I was involved in with Michael Dempsey and Shane Flanagan. And we monitored how those counties were going to spend that money over the period of time. Now, Antrim were not included in it, which was probably a mistake. They were let do their own thing. But leave that aside. There was a lot of work went on then to see how could those counties, by using that money, bring them up to the level of preparation of the Kilkennys and the Tipperaries and the Waterford, just as an example. And there was some big improvements made, and the management teams in the counties at the time bought into that. So it's very unfair to be saying there hasn't been an investment by the GA. But let's be honest about it, you guys are too young. I made a speech back at a Congress back in Cavan many years ago where I talked about hurling dying on its feet. And that came about because Tommy Barrett, who you guys know, former Tipperary secretary, and I were chairing a committee, or he was the chair, I was the secretary back in those days, and we did a survey around the country, and we saw that there was individuals in the GA were openly stopping people playing hurling in some counties. That's not the case now. We have a vibrant 5-structured hurling championship, and while we always have to do more for hurling and we always have to continue to invest in hurling, I think when people are making comments on TV about this whole area, I think they're very low on facts or information when they make those points.
Yeah. Shane, just can I say on the same thing, look, Don Logan, fairness to him, he's very provocative. He gets the debate going on hurling, which, it's always welcome. But, again, going back to some of the stuff he's been saying, I just think makes no sense. I was listening last Friday to the Hurling Nation, and he talking about getting, pointing to the example of rugby, what's there, like the rugby club scene amateur rugby has been obliterated. Is that the way the GA wants to go? Like the professional scene and the provinces are flying, but like to the detriment, the club, Ireland had a hugely thriving club scene where the clubs were the bedrock, and that has been obliterated. And if that is the view where the GA should be going, that we have inter-county franchises or big setups and the club scene is obliterated, I just think that's crazy way to go. Talking about getting Guinness back involved, I think the GA have taken a really good, positive, the high moral ground to kind of remove drink sponsorship again, while other sports haven't. And we've seen the problems with gambling and betting across, in soccer in particular. They're already way behind the GA and they're only looking at it properly. So that idea of kind of getting the Guinness back involved, and I know their marketing was superb back in the day, but like things have moved on. The other thing about automatic promotion for the likes of Carlow and all that, and again listening to Johnny Kelly saying the yo-yo effect is difficult, but that doesn't work. Like the jeopardy of the hurling championship is what has turned it into a brilliant championship. So if you give teams automatic passage, like how the practicality of that, like it sounds nice in theory, but it doesn't make any sense if you have a hurling championship where teams can't get relegated as is. So there's the mentoring thing and putting, like, the GPA tried that celebrity bondage store version. It didn't work at all. As Nickey says, there's actually a huge amount of really good positive work going on the ground. You look at the coaching tournaments. The Celtic Challenge is a wonderful tournament that involves teams from every county in Ireland, multiple teams. That's the model where, Cork, Tipp, Dublin have multiple teams in Galway as well. So this idea as well that, the GA have failed hurling. He said, talking about a child in Sligo or Carlow or wherever winning All Ireland, like Carlow just won an All Ireland, a couple of weeks ago. So like the tiered competition, every child in this country now, anyone who wants to play the game, any adult has a realistic chance of winning an All Ireland. I've seen them firsthand, and the joy that brings you. Look at Carlow. So yeah, like I just
Shane, if you just
think
talk,
there's actually,
look
as
at
Nickey
Carlow.
says, there's a huge amount of.
Shane, if you look at Carlow at all levels are participating and have been since I was involved here in Kilkenny as chair, have been participating in Kilkenny leagues every year. Yeah. And Carlow teams have been winning the Kilkenny All-County Junior Hurling League on a regular basis. Kilkenny bring in teams from Kildare as well. Naas, I think Meath are in this year. Laois have been invited in. Hurling has got to understand that while we have championships in counties, I accept their sacrosanct. County boundaries shouldn't be sacrosanct when it comes to leagues and other competitions. Philip talked about the Celtic Challenge and all of that. There are plenty of ways hurling can spread its wings. It doesn't have to be confined to the county boundaries or provincial boundaries. And Martin Fogarty proved that when they developed the whole Tailteann League up in Ulster and the Ulster Leagues and all of that. And it involved teams from Connacht and Ulster and all of that. So when it comes to hurling development, county and provincial boundaries shouldn't matter. I accept when it comes to championships, the county boundaries are sacrosanct. No problem with that. So that's where the little bit of ambition for hurling needs to be. Forget county and provincial boundaries when it comes to developing the game. And I think there's an opportunity then for any young lad who wants to play. Yes, Phil.
Yeah, and just on that, Nickey, again, Shane, actually, I did a kind of big piece with Martin Fogarty a couple of weeks back. And again, like he kind of said, right, Donegal was very good and thought he was dead on in raising the idea of who's standing up for hurling. The GA debate, should these things should it be behind a paywall or not? Like they're really relevant, important issues. And the fact that, so like I rang Martin Fogarty because like he was the obviously national development coordinator, and that position no longer is in place. So again, there is that idea who's standing up for hurling's interest. But Martin Fogarty said the development of hurling boils down to clubs. He said it's a numbers game. You take Carlow, how do we, instead of giving them automatic promotion, what's not mentioned enough is it boils down to the bloody clubs all the time. And we're talking to Brian Tracy. He said instead of having 2 senior clubs or 4 senior, they're looking at the 6 and looking at 8. And that's how you build a base. But this idea, the intercounty doesn't exist in its own. And the talk is always intercounty. Like it all comes from the clubs. And that's, Martin Fogarty said, it's a numbers game. It's a clubs game. That is how you build the game fundamentally. And you look at the Dublin model, the coaching model has been brilliant there in just putting the numbers through the roof and bringing Dublin up to a level at every grade.
Okay, well look, Nickey, we'll let you go there. Really appreciate you joining us this morning. Some great thoughts as always.
All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Cheers, Nickey.
Okay, delighted now to say we're joined by former Meath footballer Bernard Flynn. Bernard, delighted to have you on the show. How are things?
Good morning, lads. A little bit tired after watching the golf all night. I can tell you.
I got to the 14th hole. I had enough when McIlroy missed the putt, and that was it.
I know. Great day sport all around to finish it off at about 4:30 this morning. But great to be on, lads, and thanks for inviting me.
Well, great to have you. But there was so much drama at the end of the Gaelic football matches yesterday. John Heslin had a free to put Westmeath through and Tyrone out of the championship. Shane Walsh had a free to draw the game against Armagh. Aidan O'Shea was obviously trying to drop in a late ball that would have hopefully produced a goal for them, but a point would have at least got them second place, and they got neither. And then Kevin Feely, the mark that everyone thought, it was the way the mark should be. A ball from outside the 45, claimed in the corner, and then he throws it over the bar with his weaker foot to put Kildare in second position. Like, brilliant stuff in the end of those games.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. A friend of mine stayed last night and we went out for a few drinks. And the Westmeath team came back. So I met a good few of them, had a good chat at length with a number of the players I know. And to hear the disappointment and genuinely in their voices and everything, because, and we're talking about that free, like anybody else, you put your house on it, John Heslin. It was a difficult angle or distance, if you like, out, but they were that close. They should have beaten Armagh. That's the one that actually got away from them. I thought they played Armagh off the park for most of the game, but I think everything up until yesterday morning, yesterday did all of those arguments are gone, because I thought Galway, Armagh, there was a lot happening. If you look at Mayo this morning, and you know, when that's a huge blow, if you like, in a way, draw all that end of it. The shot that didn't go over, Shane Walsh, Galway, Armagh. I thought it was intriguing. It was interesting, and it sort of gave it a huge lift. And I think the championship probably only really started yesterday. And look at next weekend and the draw, etc. is going to be fantastic. So listen, I think you could have a good end to what's been a pretty dismal football championship so far. But yesterday ignited the whole lot. Brilliant.
Yeah, Phil, it was brilliant.
Yeah. I wouldn't follow the herd in saying that the new system, it justifies the whole new system, because I think if you look back, I know you'd have teams out, but if you look back, the groups were still poised if you had only two going through. But look, it was what the football champ obviously needed. And as soon as we got down to the squeaky bum time, the results and the drama and everything was brilliant. So that's what we've all been looking for, and that's why the whole debate about is there enough jeopardy in the championship, because as soon as we had that day where there was, much like kind of last day of the league, it was just brilliant stuff. I just couldn't believe Mayo find new ways to shoot themselves in the foot. It's incredible for a team that has so much. Kevin McStay doing such a good job at the end of the Mayo Cork ending. As again, we were talking about Tipp earlier losing the game, but that's changed the whole draw now. We saw Mayo Galway. Because of that madcap ending, like to be 6 up and now end up playing Galway, you just couldn't make it up.
And just on that, I think, and if I pick it up on that point, I think they just tweak just do one thing, 2 teams, not 3. That's all you have to do.
That's exactly.
Rest. And that's it.
But Trevor, we all agree, round robin group games between top teams, that's what we've all been crying out for. The Hurling Championship has had it. So absolutely, Jay done a really good thing. Just it obviously could be better, but like I say, the draw now, the way the cards have fallen, even Porrick Joyce must be kind of going, oh.
Yeah, I think both Mayo and Galway are sickened to see the sight of each other. But just for anyone who was hiding under a rock, the teams through to the quarterfinals already are Kerry, Armagh, Dublin, and Derry. So they get the week off while we wait for Kildare, Monaghan, Cork, Roscommon, Donegal, Tyrone, and Galway, Mayo. Bernard, am I just being a bit too pernickety when I say maybe if they had to avoid teams from the same province drawing against each other, or do we just have to accept you're going to get repeat pairings now and again, or teams that you've seen play a lot in the past?
Yeah, it's a fair point, but at this stage, you know, teams or managers can't afford to think that way. But the draw that Galway or Mayo neither wanted was the one that happened. I mean, I'd say to be sleepless nights now for the next couple of nights with both squads and managers. They did not want that draw, despite what anyone will tell you. But the home advantage is big. It's huge. And just to talk to Philip there, I mean, if you look at Galway, Mayo, Donegal, Tyrone, Cork, Roscommon, and Kildare and Monaghan, I mean, I just think it's fascinating. Some great ties there. I really enjoyed. I watched on TV the Kildare Roscommon match. I thought it was a great game of football. Armagh, Galway the same. But just going back to, you'd wonder, like, if after everything, if Mayo go out with the championship at this stage before the actual quarterfinals, it'll be huge. Galway the same. Tipp for All Ireland. So next weekend is going to be absolutely massive. And don't forget the Tailteann Cup, because we're in it too.
Yeah, we're definitely going to come to that at some stage.
Yeah. Who's in that, Bernard?
There's the draw that neither of them wanted as well. Meath and Antrim, Conor and Andy McEntee. That's fairly spiked up, I can tell you.
I'd say Andy McEntee must be disgusted when he saw that draw.
I don't know about that.
I'm not so sure. You know, he might tell you that, but I'd say quietly, it's one probably Colm didn't want. Antrim probably in bonus territory at this stage, and after beating, they got here against Westmeath by, what was it, 28 to 7 points or something. He's turned it around. He's done very well with them. But it's a draw. I'd say Meath and Colmore didn't really want. But I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be definitely a camera on the sideline alone will be worth anything next week with those two guys.
Well, look, there was a bit of a grudge end. Like, it didn't end that well with Andy and certain members. You know, the way the parting of ways with the board and different things. So, look, I think there'll be a few different layers to it.
Yeah, there was, and he'd 6 years, and it was a pity it ended up the way it did for everybody's sake. He'd put a huge effort in, and it shouldn't have happened. There was a lot of stuff on social media, etc. But I suppose that's the age we're in. You live by the sword, you die by it, type of thing. So, but he's moved on. He moved on very quickly within days. Up in Antrim, surprised everybody in Meath, us all. I'd say probably surprised himself as well. But and Colin, I was over actually in Navan on Saturday watching Wexford, and yeah, we are where we are. That's the bottom line. The could only beat was in front of them. Couldn't believe how bad Wexford was. I was shocked. But Meath played well, a bit of freshness, a bit of youth, a bit of pace. And all augurs well for a double header next week in Croke Park. But can't wait for next weekend, particularly the draw, though. You didn't go through it, and not probably really in detail, Shane, yet. But the draw, I think, has been fascinating. Look at Tyrone and Donegal. Donegal, after getting their act together, have to travel away. Tyrone have to travel away to them. So they have it all to do as well. So really, really, yesterday really got the whole championship going and talking points this morning.
Yeah. Donegal, Shane, clearly have shown every other county in Ireland the recipe for success. Like, lose a manager, get an independent report out, which kind of takes you apart in terms of governance, finance, structures, everything, and then obviously start playing some really good football. Like I said, I've watched that match again and Saturday, and like, they were really impressive, full value for the win over Monaghan, and looked like a team playing again with confidence, lots of talent, and kind of realizing the potential that everybody felt was in them. So, like, Michael Murphy was standing, I think, beforehand, talking about the kind of doom and gloom, and that leadership was required from the county board, that instead of trying to bury these findings, he said they need to be actioned. And then at the final whistle, he's standing, having the chat, big broad smile, talking to man of the match, Brendan McCall. Like, so they were really impressive.
Yeah, like, Bernard, are you surprised with the way they've managed to turn it around? Like, if you look at on the face of it, the players that they have, like, getting Oisín Gallen on the field at the same time as the likes of Jamie Brennan, Thompson, and Oisín Gallen being the most obvious one, all the injury problems he's had. But, like, there is quality there, so they shouldn't have been where they were earlier in the year.
No, and Paddy Carr, actually, I'd know Paddy in that. It was an awful tough time in everybody. When things aren't fully right, they're going to seep down into the players and into the group and the dressing room. But I have to admire the way they've regrouped. But people might not get it. They've some damn good footballers. Paddy McBrearty coming back. But the players you just mentioned, and many throughout that team and every line, there's some really good, serious footballers. And it doesn't take a little, a win. It's a bit like Meath, where we are. You win a couple of games or get a good performance, and guys buy back into it very quickly. The footballing modern player today can adapt very, very quickly, but they have very good footballers, a bit of structure in the background. The new management team obviously addressed and tweaked a few things that weren't right, and players are probably happy with that. And good footballers actually can turn games around. And I tell you, Donegal at home, the way they're playing and the performance at the weekend, Tyrone have it all to do. They really have, because Westmeath probably were the better team against them. And Donegal, off the field, I think they have an awful lot of work to do, like ourselves and Meath, long-term and sustained longevity, staying at the top table or competing. I think behind the scenes, that's what Michael Murphy was speaking about. But for now, they've seemed to got their act together on the field, and the players are bought in, and they're going to be damn hard to beat next weekend.
And just to jump back to Meath again, because you were at that 223 to 12-point win over Wexford. What was the mood music like a month ago, and what's the mood music like around the county in Colmore now?
Listen, when the league didn't finish too well, being beaten by Offaly was a huge blow, and the manner of that defeat. I was over there, and the lack of the heart, guts, whatever you want to call it, commitment, endeavour, that shocked everyone the first 40, 50 minutes. But in saying that, I know we beat Tipperary, Waterford, down the last day. I think that was an injection. Down, kick 17 wides, I think it was, and probably could and should have beaten us. But there's he's brought a lot of new players in. Young Conor Gray came in again there at the weekend. An awful lot of young new players are in there now. There's a freshness, a bit of a bounce in their step. I know it's only Wexford Division 3 and 4 teams, but winning matches does give an air. To answer your question, Shane, there's a little bit more upbeat feeling in the county. Going to Croke Park next weekend, albeit the Tailteann Cup, it is where we are. And I think we have a really good chance of winning it. I know Down mightn't think that, or Andy McAdee and Antrim, but I think Meath are capable of beating whoever's left. And that would, ensure top championship football in the top tier next year. If you look at Westmeath, they performed brilliantly in the 3 games. And that's the only way we can build small steps, little bricks. And it wasn't easy. Colin O'Rourke, anyone that knows him, is a proud man, a brilliant Meath player, a great teammate of mine. And he's had some lonely, dark evenings on his own, I'm sure. He did not want to be there. He is. But what do you do when you dust yourself down with a new group of players? And I'd say all the deadwood, with no disrespect to players, he's going to move them all on. And he's doing it pretty quickly. And you'll see probably an entire, bar 3 or 4 players, an entire new bunch next year in Division 2. But listen, let's go to Croke Park next weekend and get to a Tailteann Cup final and win it. And we're well capable of doing it.
Phil, the knives were out for Colin O'Rourke not so long ago, but like winning this would, give him a nice bit of breathing room heading into next year.
It would. I was actually down there the day against Dublin in the League Park Tailteann. The place was hopping. It was 2 hours beforehand. There was a huge crowd around. There's such a yearning and an interest and a desire in Meath for the footballers to do well. The place, I don't know, were you there that day? The place was absolutely hopping. And then the ball was thrown in and the match was over within 15 minutes. And they were so naively set up that day. I think, I remember for one of the goals, Dublin literally, was it Sean Bowles? Someone carried the ball out from their own half back line and ran half the length of the field and with no cover, and Dublin kind of, I think, having a bit of a win. So it was just kind of really naive defensively, setup wise, but they've, in fairness to them, I think Colin, even afterwards, he was a little bit shell shocked in terms of, I think we were all expecting a bit of fight, a bit of blood and thunder. There wasn't a yellow card hardly in the match. There wasn't a tackle. Dublin played this controlled style. But since then, Colin and the lads, they've seemed to really learn the lessons. So I think we've seen the importance of these, the round robin competition, where it's allowed teams brilliant in terms of development. Like if you cut Meath's campaign off after the province, the year would be just nearly a write-off. Whereas now the team have learned, the management have clearly learned, reorganised, brought in fresh blood, and there's a real feel-good factor in a sense. And very much like Donegal had a blowout against Down in Ulster, go back the years pre-backdoor, and that would have been an awful write-off to their year. And you look at now, they're realising their potential. So, again, through the games and development, good management, I think, the parallels are there. The new competition structures are brilliant in developing players, developing counties, So, and we saw with Kildare. Kildare were, looking like, until the weekend, looking like the season would be a disaster, really, but judging by their talent. But again, they've proven that there's huge talent within the team. So I think it's great to see counties kind of figure things out as they go and just really develop, which this is what the competitions are for.
Yeah, people always say that you learn more in losing, and we're kind of seeing proof of that across the board in both codes probably. But Bernard, Armagh beat Galway by 16 points to 112, and before the game, in the last couple of weeks, I've been tipping up Galway to be the All-Ireland winners this year because I hadn't believed in Kerry so much, and they go and smash Loud there yesterday. But the thing that kind of would worry me if I was a Galway supporter is Shane Walsh missed a penalty and that late free. And I know anyone can miss either, but to miss both, and he'd only, I think, 3 points from play in the entire championship before this. You'd Paul Conroy and Peter Cook with wides late on, just completely skewed shots. And I just wonder, where's the composure with Galway? Or am I being a little unfair now?
No, it's a fair point. I watched the game closely, and I actually said that to myself as well. You look at Shane Walsh's form, it's a huge worry, despite what you can sugarcoat it any way you like. He's not the same player he was last year since the Club All-Ireland series. I would say, Mayo, if you were to say it now, Mayo probably would rather, and Kevin McStay, rather the draw nearly away, if you like, to really galvanise them, get them going. There's pressure on Galway to deliver, but I thought they did a lot of silly things yesterday. There was no composure, as you said, but the wild shooting, wrong shot options, some of the main players really not in the best of form. And look at Comer, like a fully fit Damien Comer is a huge difference. Like they've only a week to get it right. Yes, there's some damn good players there, but the likes of Comer and the likes of Walsh. And Ian Burke has been very, very quiet. He's not really doing what we'd expect him to do at the level he has done in the past. That's another worry for me as well up front. And midfield, yet McDade, you have Conroy and guys like that. And defensively, they were opened up quite a bit, particularly in the air. I just think in the air, they're struggling with a high ball on occasions as well. If you look at Mernon and players like that. And outside of Kelly, I think Kelly has been incredible, probably one of the players of the season this year. But yes, they've it all to do. They're capable of doing it. And, they love the challenge. Whoever wins this game next weekend, it's a huge, huge victory for them and really sets them up for Croke Park, etc. But Galway, still question marks. But what a gigantic, titanic struggle next weekend between those two Titans over there. And I think Galway's forwards, if you were saying it right, if you were looking at it now as the weak builds, Galway have a few more issues maybe than Mayo, and the pressure's on, particularly when they're at home. But there are three key marquee forwards. And Comer's fitness, Walsh and Burke, for me, is a worry. That triangle there. If they don't perform, they won't win.
Yeah, and Sean Kelly, if he's injured as well, because he was so good. Like the leadership to number one, go up and win the penalty, 2 to score his own goal. He actually burst through for a point as well that he pulled over with his foot from the ground. But like for Armagh, they finished top of the group now, Phil. And they did this without Rian O'Neill, who of course was suspended. Kieran McGeeney had plenty to say afterwards. Now he wasn't naming names, but he was talking about people tweeting and looking for clicks for their articles.
Was that you, Shane?
Is great for him. Huh? No, it couldn't have been me anyway. I think he might have been talking about someone from Derry. But what did you make of that for Armagh? Like they now, they'll have Rian O'Neill coming back. They have an extra week off. They have players like Andrew Mernon flying, so they've got to be feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I must say, like Geezer's always fascinating. When he chats, he's really interesting. He seems to have a black book like Paul Galvin of critics that he is his go-to. To me, Armagh probably the most frustrating team in Ireland, because I look at them and I think they had such talent. And I thought, like Geezer's been there long enough. I thought they kind of, when they did a job on Dublin and Croker and were playing that long angled ball into Rian O'Neill and he ran amok, I thought they kind of finally settled on a really exciting, winning formula. And then they turned around this year and played this kind of, football from a decade ago, setup wise. The rationale, supposedly they were preparing for, Ulster. So I find that when they go for it, sometimes they just play with too much fear and caution and overthink things. Like the Galway match last year, I was actually there kind of watching it from the other side of the stand, and I couldn't get over, like, Rian O'Neill came into it as one of the hottest tickets and he basically played out as a loose, drifting centre forward role where he had minimal impact. Armagh were limping to defeat until they got a jammy goal with the end. And we all remember Rian O'Neill's unbelievable kick, but like Armagh were done without really going for the game. So that's why, again, was it against Tyrone? Like they created various goal chances, and at times they're playing very well. But just, I think if they had showed a little bit more ambition or just less caution and went for it, I think the talent is there. And again, they proved it, in fairness to Geezer. Maybe it's all part of the master plan, because the group worked out and they earned their stripes at the weekend, and particularly without Rian O'Neill. But I don't know, I just thought even looking for Rian O'Neill to get off for what he did, I thought was, just take it on the chin, lads, and get going, because he was banged to rights for dropping his knee that time. So look, yeah, they've great potential. I'd love to see them trust themselves a bit more.
Bernard, who's your All-Ireland favourite from here? Very difficult to decide.
It is. It's very difficult. If you look at it, I know it was only loud yesterday, but that performance from Kerry, it looks like they're coming to the pace of it a little bit more. Not sure it's the golden plan that was planned out going back over the weeks. I think Dublin are going to have a massive say. I just think the strength of the panel, the demolition job they did on Derry, I think in the National League, people don't really realise no one does that to Derry. They did the same to Louth, where teams couldn't break down Louth. So they've given those two teams a fair maul in Croke Park. I think they'll have a big say in it. Obviously, Kerry, It's probably the most open championship I can recall for many, many years. And look, if Galway or Mayo, whoever gets through, if Mayo can get through there and build, and then particularly up front and improve a bit more, the likes of, Tyrone could get an away win. For me, it probably come down to Kerry or Dublin at this stage again. I would have said Galway a week ago, but yesterday sort of got me mind thinking again there, the question marks you said in. But right now, pick of a coin between Kerry and Dublin for me, honestly, at this stage, purely because that bit of extra class they have up front. And I just think Dublin are getting a lot more of fringe players. Look at Pascal, players like that, dropping guys to the bench, Mannion, Kilkenny, fellas there on the bench that you wouldn't dream of it, Mick Fitzsimons, etc. I just think with Merchant back, with McCaffrey maybe having to say, the squad in depth, they're getting fit. They've done serious training in the winter, people mightn't realise, affected them in the league a little bit. And Kerry with Clifford and the boys yesterday. And that sun is like that, bouncing, hard ground. A reluctant Kerry or Dublin, but who knows at this stage. Galway, I need to see more from them and Mayo to really. I would have had them two in the top four, but I have to. Next weekend is massive for them. But at the moment, a hesitant Dublin Kerry.
Yeah, I would have thought the two biggest winners as a draw were two of the teams who aren't playing. Like Dublin and Kerry must be laughing here, because it was only a week ago we were chatting to someone. We were kind of saying, "Oh, it could be a Galway Mayo All Ireland final." Like who knows the way they were going. That could it be, and could Galway kind of end Mayo's misery, or that continue that losing streak kind of on the biggest stage? And here we are, like Dublin Kerry sailing through, and now you've got a bunch of big hitters and other contenders going to knock each other out, So
it's interesting with Cork actually, Bernard, because they beat Mayo 114 to 111. Nobody had been talking about them. They've obviously not been great in Munster for so many years at this stage. Number one for Mayo, they seem to lack a Lee Keegan type leader. They'd love to have him still out in the field when things were turning. But Fintan O'Toole of the 42 had some great stats about Cork's finishes in the All-Ireland group stages. From the 58th minute on, they outscored Louth 6-3. From the 59th minute on, they outscored Kerry 5-2. And from the 57th minute here, they outscored Mayo 1-6 to 0. So they really are a team that, you talked about Dublin doing a big pre-season. They really have the fitness right by the sounds of that.
Yeah, and you think of the very first game of the league with Meath went down there and actually, battered them, put up a big score. And John Cleary, he's take great. I think he the plaudits definitely for what he's tried to do. I think they stuck with it, even though when they were conceding big scores in the first couple of games, they improved defensively. I think the structure really has improved there. But also, if you look, they actually gave Kerry a great game. I think they got great confidence. They weren't hammered. Kerry didn't dust them like they always do. I think that really injected some really good sort of confidence, if you like. Like 1-6, Sherlock coming off the bench yesterday. But that is some worry from Mayo, not to score, from the 55th minute onwards, if you like, the guts of 20 minutes in total. Massive worry for them. But you said Cork finishing very strong. And I think their bench, if you look at the way they're injecting players with pace and a bit of class, particularly Sherlock coming up, but they have great youth. They have just confidence with Cork. If Cork teams believe in themselves and that bit more steel injected in them, which I think maybe Walsh is trying to do and John Cleary's trying to instill there. Cork were always too nice over the last number of years. You need that bit more devilment in them, a bit more steel in them. Billy Morgan would have had in Cork teams. So if they bring that to the table, if you look at it, Roscommon, and you could see in Davy Buck's face, he didn't want to travel on the road next weekend. And that's a tough draw for them. But Roscommon on the road, they're dangerous. And I tell you, Cork have it all to do against Roscommon because they have a good structure, a good setup. But Cork, I think, would be licking their lips. Imagine Cork to get into a quarterfinal now, to beat Roscommon, and be a huge plus for them and build on Division 2 next year and maybe get promotion. Well done to them. But what a comeback. And as I say, I keep going back to it and thinking in my head last night and this morning. It was a disastrous finish for Mayo yesterday. It really was. And, what occurred afterwards, an away draw to Galway. But full credit to Cork. And their bench is having a serious impact on that finishing home stretch.
I'm sure you know Kevin McStay well enough from RTE punditry over the year and so on. Well, maybe you don't. I don't know. But
I do. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on his tenure so far this year?
He came and stayed in Mullingar a few weeks ago. They played Kildare in a challenge and had a great chat with him that night. Met him that night for a few hours. I think Mayo have really got it right in the coaching end of the backroom team and all that end of it. I think they've had a superb league. yes, if you look at it, the defeat to Roscommon was a blow to him personally, I would say, and the the Mayo team. To lose to Roscommon would have been a blow, but they gave guys a bit of a break. I think about 10 days, 14 days off. Everybody got away from each other, came back, did a month's hard block work, and it's for me still up front. And Donny Buckley, Stephen Rochford, I think the coaching, the young players they're bringing through, I think they have a massive chance under Kevin McStay over the next few years to win All Ireland. Will it happen this year? The more I see of the last weeks, for me, it may be not this year. But I do think the young players and the way they're being coached and the mindset overall, I think they have a huge chance under his stewardship. Great league, but I'd say he'll be a little bit disappointed with the inconsistency of a few of their performances. Like Roscommon bullied them, let's be honest. They dictated the game from start to finish. That surprised me a bit. Then you go and see them against Kerry, world beaters, stunning, superb, everything you'd want from a Mayo team. And then maybe the game against Louth, which I watched, was pretty horrific to watch and disappointing. And then the defeat yesterday. So it's that inconsistency with Mayo putting back-to-back performances together. And I go back to it, up front, scoring forwards from play. Do they have enough to win All Ireland? That's the big question mark for me. I think they'll be okay midfield, defensively, tackling, Donny Buckley, all that end of it. I think they'll hit the mark there and tick every other box. But scoring forwards, look at the last two games. Struggled to break teams down, struggled to score against Louth. The same yesterday, didn't score for the last 19, 20 minutes of the game. Massive worry, but I think he's doing a very good job. And I think over a 3 to 5 year period, he's a serious chance of genuinely winning All Ireland. Maybe not, might not happen this year.
Phil, I know you have to leave just there, but in a word, who's going to win the All Ireland this year? That's the beauty of it.
Probably it pains we'd say, but David Clifford's Kerry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, Phil, I know you have to go and work elsewhere, so I really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah. Good to see you. Bernard looks eternally young for someone who had very little sleep, so fair play. Cheers, Shane.
Okay, great to have Phil on there. What did you make of? I'm not sure if you got an opportunity to watch Kildare against Roscommon. Maybe you were heading elsewhere. You did.
Yeah, watched it all.
Yeah, Davy Burke was obviously fairly upset after the game. He was, he was very downbeat about it.
Davy, I've loved him since he's come in there. He's done a great job overall. The players have bought into it. You can see that. I don't think that he should be as disappointed at all as he came across on the TV yesterday afterwards when he said it had gone soft to me. It was the line of the weekend for me. A few things. They retreated back into the old Roscommon way a little bit. They let Kildare dictate the tempo and the physical stakes in the last 10, 15 minutes, which I was surprised at. But they played well overall. Enda Smith is having a wonderful season. I think they've found some very good players defensively. McCormick and players like that. Ben O'Carroll up front has been excellent. Eddie Nolan at midfield. I think he's building a good squad with a good, and the attitude of Roscommon players going back over the years might have down tools thrown in the white flag. That hasn't happened. I think they can be very, very happy. An away draw won't bother. It's the only team that probably won't bother is Roscommon. They'll dust themselves down. They love their football. I think Kieran Murtagh has been brilliant. Dermot Murtagh yesterday, a quiet game. You could see the real Dermot Murtagh next weekend against Cork, and they will need him on fire up front. So that, I don't think Cork, it's by no means home and dusted for Cork as a home draw. I think Roscommon, you'll see them dusting themselves down. And Davy has really got this thing with him. He doesn't buy fools. He's taking no mess, and you're not doing the business. A couple of guys taking off yesterday. We're looking at him, didn't even look their way whatsoever. Didn't care who you are, what you are. So I liked what he's done, I have to say. And I think they have a very good chance next weekend. But Kildare dictated. What annoyed him was, and the physical end of it and the tackling, they were second best for about 2/3 of that game, and that annoyed him more than anything. And they weren't allowed to keep the ball the way. That's the one thing Kildare got right. If you keep the possession, keep the ball away from Roscommon, it just gets them thinking and maybe starts spooking them a little bit, which Kildare did. But overall, he's done a great job, and I think they have a great chance next weekend. They really have against Cork away. Won't bother them.
And Glenn Ryan obviously was fairly frustrated after recent games about the performances and saying that they weren't basically doing what they were working on in training. So it seemed like he was turning it on the players a nice bit. But they got a lot right here. Even when they went down to 13 men with the 2 black cards, to be honest, I thought Keane McKeown held onto the arm of Alex Byrne and pulled him to the ground, and it should have been a black card the other way. I'm sick of this diving crack and holding onto arms. The other one, I don't think Ryan Houlihan can have any complaint at all, because he pulled down Ben O'Carroll. But they managed the game quite well when they were down to 13, and the goal came from a mistake from Owen Doyle just as they were just about to be back up to 14, or they were just back to 14. And then, like, 5 marks in a game. Not many teams are getting 5 marks out of it. And fair play to Kevin Feely knocking over a winner on his weaker left foot. Like, that was outrageous stuff, really, for a guy who did his Achilles last year.
Oh, it was brilliant. And listen, his interview after was very, very good, and he was down to earth and humble. Spoke of his lack of pace, he said, so he'd bring something different to the table. And he's obviously practiced. He's off both sides. He's if you look at Fenton, look at Kevin Feely, not too many big men around the middle of the park have the skill set that like Fenton has. But Feely is a serious, skillful footballer. Right side, left side, can field in the air. But to stand up and win the mark the way he did under pressure, but to put the ball over the bar with his left foot, just curl it beautifully. He's predominantly right foot. Was a stunning score, absolutely superb score.
We just seem to have lost Bernard there.
But
Have we lost the Bernard?
No, I think that's the draw. It's the Andy McIntyre, Colin O'Rourke next weekend. Meet people on already. No, just you look at it. Kildare, like, you look at the mistake they made for the goal. Enda Smith finished it beautifully and slid in the right corner. But overall, the way they came back, I was disappointed with Kildare against Dublin. I have to say, they were bullied. They were poor. They didn't offer enough for me. But that win was huge for Glen Ryan. It's a funny one with the players and the talent they have in the county. It's literally split on the management team, and they're getting a lot of stick, and they got an awful lot of stick. Now, they gave us an awful hiding in the last game of the league, where we sort of had to win. That would put us down into the Tailteann Cup, and I thought they played well that day. But the Kildare public haven't fully fallen in love with some of the greats of the game. There's so many of them there in the management team, and they have a big job to win the Kildare public over. But that win yesterday, I think it's huge, and it's just the lack of consistency. Next weekend, if you look at it there, Kildare and Monaghan. Kildare, where will it be played? Probably a Moore Park, I'd say, Shane. But Monaghan will be dangerous. Monaghan will be a wounded animal, won't be happy with the weekend. They were poor against Galway in a lot of areas, and Kildare just need to be on their guard for a backlash in Monaghan. But another win there and into a quarterfinal would be huge, and after staying in Division 2. So, yeah, the boys have it all to do. I think they have a tough gig there, and GA Public and Clare maybe have been a little bit harsh on them.
Yeah, PWell74 here saying time for Mass Bernard. That was actually in the background here. There's a church bell going there, 90. So the final thing I'll ask you about then is Derry beat Clare 119 to 113. So Derry, they're still rolling towards, I mean, they look like a top team that maybe they can have a say in the championship. But Colm Connaughton's, he's walked away after 10 years with Clare, and the job he's done there has been quite incredible.
It was sad to see him going. I'm sure he will be back in football some way, shape or form. I think he's been incredible as a person, as a human being, and the way he's conducted and handled himself. He's a lesson to a lot of managers, let me tell you, who haven't got the same, the same manners and passion and, just downright humility that he has. I see some of the tweets from the players. I thought, Cleary's tweet yesterday was just magnificent. The way they think of what they taught him, the confidence he gave them, the way he's changed, Clare to be very well set up. They were the unluckiest team in the league. They should never have went down this year in Division 2. They were so unlucky. We were actually lucky to stay up. They're probably a team that should have actually stayed up. We should have went down maybe. But 10 years to do what he did in a predominantly hurling county is just extraordinary. Some of the achievements up to Division 2, superb. There's no words can say what he's done. I think it's only when he finishes he's going to be some act to follow. I wouldn't like to be that guy taking it on, but a brilliant guy. Sad to see it.
Well, Bernard, look, you've been brilliant with your time, especially seeing as you had a few jars last night. I'd say you're under a small bit of pressure, so really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shane. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
All the best. Okay, brilliant to have Bernard Flynn on there. Obviously, All-Ireland winner in the past as well, one of Meath's greats. Just to go over those score lines again from the Tailteann Cup, the quarterfinals. Down beat Cavan 117 to 15 points there. Meath 223 Wexford 12. Laois 114 to 14 points winners over Limerick, and that's a big one for Billy Sheehan considering all the criticism, and he even talked about that himself after the last day. Antrim, they beat Carlow 119 to 115, so that was a good game, and then they pulled away late on. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you'll get 15% off. If you want us to run a club fundraiser, if you email events@ourgame.ie, and if you want one of the coaching clinics, also email events@ourgame.ie. If you want to get the audio podcast, that's at patreon.com/ourgame, and we'll see you again on Thursday.